Hey everybody, welcome to the GenChurch Midweek Podcast. My name is John. I'm the engagement pastor, and sitting across the table from me today is Kyle Davies, lead pastor.
Let's do this.
I know, man. We keep switching locations.
It is. This is a little bit of another throwback.
I know, man. It's throwback to those who've been on since the beginning of this journey, this ride. We're back into my apartment right now, so the wall is still pretty bland from the angle in which we see, but everywhere else is fill. We just picked the one spot where there is literally nothing.
We have switched the sides of the table from the old days. We've switched it up a little bit.
I know. It's okay. Things can change. We
Things
can be
are allowed to
flexible.
change.
Yeah.
Yes.
Heck yeah, man. You get it. Even maybe for you, you'll kind of flex out of being a Jets fan someday.
Nope.
It's a
Never.
tough time, man.
No,
Time.
don't try to flex on my
You still
Jets. They're
gonna
awful.
roll with Sam Darnold?
Yes, we're still gonna roll with Sam Darnold, top 15 QB in the league.
No. We will not even entertain that thought. We'll just continue to roll on into Jesus' word because it will teach us patience and compassion for people, especially Kyle. So, Kyle, speaking of that, we're continuing our Mark series. And so go ahead and catch us up. Like what passage are we going through today? Kind of where are we at in Mark?
So today we're going to look at Mark chapter 8, verses 1 through 10. And what has happened so far is we're continually learning more about Jesus. And as we're getting to know Jesus, we're seeing people's different responses to him. And so sometimes it's combative, sometimes it's an attempt to, like the Pharisees or others are trying to kind of trap Jesus. Others are just amazed and perplexed. And what we see Jesus is, we also see him understanding that his time to head towards Jerusalem. Man, every
One
time,
day you will learn how to say this.
Jerusalem. Man, I don't know why. Going down to maybe a capital city of Israel,
they're going to J-Town, right?
They're going to J-Town. That's what I'll just start saying. Man, I don't know why. All of a sudden, that is a word that I can't say. Anyways,
gosh.
But he's getting ready to hit that road down to J-Town.
Yeah.
And so in preparation for that, we see Mark begin to escalate the story. Yeah. And he starts to take Jesus further and further away to kind of some Gentile territory, some Tyre and Sidon, he eventually gets to Caesarea Philippi, a really far north point, and then he's going to make his way. And so we're almost to the point where Jesus is so far away, and then he starts on his road. So we're not quite there yet. We're almost to kind of that climactic point where Jesus is geographically, he's so far away and head down. So as we get to there, what we see is Mark start to mix some themes together about who Jesus is in different responses. He starts to bring these groups of people who have responded to Jesus and starts to have them all converge around the life of Jesus at the same time. And so Jesus is still up in Galilee, still up north, kind of making excursions of rest and time away in preparation to head down to J-Town.
Yes.
So that's where we're at. And so as we look at Mark chapter 8 today, John, what would you say as we look at this passage together stands out to you as you look through this passage kind of at a first glance?
Dude, at a first glance, I read the title of it. It says Jesus feeds the 4,000. And it's like, hey, that sounds familiar.
Yes.
A little different though, but literally 2 chapters or maybe 3 chapters. So I'm not going to flip back. But we saw a passage that was Jesus feeds 5,000. And what we begin to see here is we see a very similar story. Jesus has a great crowd around him. He's teaching, he's talking to them, spending time with them, and says after 3 days, they haven't had anything to eat. He didn't want to send them home because he was like, all right, you're going to faint on your way home. Physically, we need some nourishment. Looks at his disciples and says, all right, well, we got to eat. And they're like, how are we going to feed all these people?
Yeah.
And Jesus goes, well, how many loaves do you have? And I think they said they have 7 loaves. And he took that, he broke it, fed the entire people. They even had 7 loaves of baskets left for the disciples after that. It's this very similar story to what we just saw, but it's even funny as we begin to talk about this. I think the thing that stands out most in this observation that I take away from this is this reminder of almost reminder for the disciples and the people around him, because there's probably people in this crowd who were there for the first one. Like there might have been people who are still there, and this might be a couple months down the road, but it's this reminder of like, no, like Jesus has done that in the past. He can still do it, and he might still do it again down the road. So Kyle, you mentioned a couple themes that we've been seeing. What themes do you think are present that we should be looking out for in this passage?
Well, we see first that there are crowds, and that they don't have anything. And we see Jesus have compassion on them. So we see he is moved by people. We see him also get to use his disciples to minister to these crowds and really challenge his disciples to say, okay, I've been teaching you. Yeah. Like we've been going on this journey. Yeah. Ready, set, go. Here's your opportunity to pass the test. Yes. And guess what? They kind of get it, not get it. So they're like, okay, they at least acknowledge that they had some food, and this time they're like, hey, we'll give it to Jesus. Yeah. Again, just Jesus takes the bread, he gives thanks, he broke it, and he gave. So take thanksgiving, broke, and gave. Those 4 words are something I teed up a couple weeks ago. Yeah. That we're gonna see kind of in the last days of Jesus, the significance of this. But Mark's building something. He's using repetitive phrases to help us get a picture of what Jesus does with what we have. Takes, gives thanks, breaks it, and then spreads it around, gives it, and there's what we see here. There's plenty left over. And I really like what verse 8 says. It says they ate and were satisfied. So there's satisfaction. There was some left over. Yeah. And then Jesus doesn't stay with the crowds. He wants to retreat with his disciples to spend some time with them, to basically to debrief what has just happened. Yeah. So while Jesus is ministering to the masses, what he wants to make sure is that the disciples understand who he is and what he is about, because clearly they have not gotten it to this point.
Not yet.
Not yet. And that's what I think Mark's building to, not to get too far ahead in the story, but it's like kind of that aha moment of, oh, Jesus, this is what you've been trying to teach us. This is what you've been trying to show us. Now, they don't fully understand what that means yet, but Jesus is still trying to show them who he is and what he is about. So you have this convergence of crowds and few, compassion and provision, abundance, and also just Jesus doing something with what we have. Yeah. So John, out of kind of all those observations, all those themes that I just articulated, I even kind of, I don't want to say give it away a little bit, but what do you think, if you had to sum up kind of this passage, a passage that's very similar, as you noted, to something that we've seen before, how might you sum it up in a single sentence or single thought for us today?
Man, if I had to kind of condense this, I would say this: Jesus can and will care for people where they are. I think one of the things that, as we were sitting here talking, that really stood out to me, and it just kind of hit me right now, is in verse 9, where it says, "And he sent them away." He has this crowd of 4,000 people that he's been teaching to for 3 days, and he sends them back home to wherever they're at to share that same message. So they can take that teaching, that time they've spent with him, and go and share that with others. It's this reminder that Jesus is with us. He cares for us where we are and wherever we're from. So as we go back to our communities, like it's the same thing. Like we talk about this on Sundays. When we gather together, we spend time in fellowship together. We're connecting, praising God. But when we go out into the community, we have our different places. We're sent out into our community, to wherever we're at. We're going to share. We're going to invite, and we're going to care for people the same way Jesus cares for us.
That's good. That's good. It's Jesus provides for them where they are and sends them back to where they're from. Yeah. Satisfied. Yes. Like, and I think that's so crucial to see that as we approach Jesus, he will have compassion on us, and that as we encounter him, if we come to him needy, then our soul or maybe even physical needs will be satisfied, and that we are to return to where we've come from.
Yeah.
And with his disciples in particular, is he's trying to almost debrief that with them.
Yeah.
That he can satisfy, he does work, he does meet those needs. And really, as we get into the next story, not to give too much away, we see the disciples really struggle with that reality. I think the other thing that I see here is it's not clear cut, like what necessarily the initial solution is. Like the disciples have a couple opportunities to really lean on past experiences, and it's in this moment, will they have the same compassion on the crowds that Jesus has displayed for them? Yeah. Will they catch what Jesus wants them to be and to do, or will they kind of miss it? Yeah. Once again.
Well, I think even one of the things to note here is this encounter, while it's maybe 2 pages in the book for us, like this could easily be a couple months down the road for them. And while they aren't perfect, like even in what Mark chooses in his wording, like you see growth. Like the disciples don't say, "Oh, send them away so they can go get something to eat." Like they notice the need, and they say, how even though they ask, "How are we going to feed all of them?" They don't say, "Send them away." Yeah. Like you see a little bit of growth out of them. It's not perfect. You would kind of hope, oh, we've seen Jesus feed over 5,000 people. Like, hey, Jesus, why don't you do this again? Do it again. It's over. But there's still that little bit of hesitancy, but there's still a level of growth there that we see from them.
Well, they almost do what Jesus does to them, which they answer a question with a question. Yeah. And in fact, they do. And it's as they look, it says, where can anyone get enough bread here in this desolate place to feed these people? And again, they're looking at their surroundings, they're looking at their circumstances, they're looking at what they don't have. Yeah. And Jesus says, okay, let's look at what you do have, and remember, if I am with you, then I can take what you have and multiply it. Yeah. The result is satisfaction and abundance based on what they have had. And so I think it all comes back to perspective and the person of Jesus. Yeah. So for us, as we start to think about, well, how does this start to translate into our everyday lives? I think what Jesus challenges us to, and as we go to him, is one, we can go to him. Yeah. And he will have compassion on us. Yeah. And as we encounter the person of Jesus, he will challenge us, and he will communicate an eternal and an ultimate perspective that says, I will take what you have and multiply it. So make sure you're aware of what you have. Yeah. And this was, I think, in this scenario, the disciples were aware that they had 7 loaves of bread. Yeah. Last time, they weren't even sure like what's around.
They had to go look.
Yeah. They had to go seeking for it to recognize what they had around them. And so I think for us to be aware of what we do have around us, and that Jesus can take whatever we have and multiply it into abundance. And to use some of those 4 words that Jesus uses, is he gives thanks to God for what they presently have. And in giving thanksgiving for what they have, he then multiplies that. And so I'm already thinking about...
I was going to say, did you just drop in Thanksgiving?
I did.
Thanksgiving?
I did.
Well, no, I even like how you began talking about that, because it for me, in my mind, like it correlates to something tangible that I've seen from some of the people around Generations this week. Like when you take this inventory of what you have, and it's like, how can I have compassion and love and care for people with what I have? So just this past week, we had some people around our church who said, hey, I have some money, some financial standing, where during this season of COVID, like I've been blessed. We're still comfortable, and we have some excess. Like even some people who don't necessarily have excess have said, hey, I've been given to before. Yeah. I want to give to other people. And so just this past week, 3 different families are going to receive gift cards from people all around Generations, and people who usually don't have much around this time, or who've even communicated, hey, we don't necessarily have much during this time with COVID, with job loss and all of that we don't have necessarily as much so that we can celebrate Thanksgiving or even have food during this time off from school. Yeah. And so people who are around generations who look around, have compassion and care for the people and say, hey, I have some ability to love and care tangibly. Yeah. Let me give a couple gift cards to the church for these families. So we're able to drop that off so that they can have Thanksgiving and love and care and have that food around the table.
Well, and it's generosity is an expression of what you're thankful for. Yeah. Like when you are thankful for what you have, it will translate into generosity. And the result is that those who are the recipients of your thanksgiving and then your generosity and really your dependence on Jesus, they will be satisfied. I think that's what's so amazing. It's as it's talking about the crowds and it's talking about the people. It's because the disciples were aware of what they had. Yeah. That even though they didn't quite get it right away, they were like, okay, Jesus, do something with it. The result was the other people who were present were satisfied. Yeah. And then there was plenty left over. Yeah. And I think that shows us something that we should, one, be aware of what we have. Yeah. Two, we need to make sure we can turn it over to Jesus. Yeah. Two, we should expect him to do something with what we have. Yeah. Focus on what we have rather than what we have not. Yeah. And then trust and know that the end result will be people are satisfied and there will be abundance. Because I think in a world that says, man, what about me? Yeah. It's taking that perspective to go from what about me to what about we. Yeah. And that's a collectivist mentality. Yeah. That challenges the faith in our everyday life. Yeah. To start to think of collective, of how do we do this for others rather than, how does this affect me? Yeah. Yep. It's a spirit over self mentality. It's a give over get mentality. I mean, the disciples, I couldn't even say it's a progress over perfection. They went to Jesus. They got better, even though it wasn't perfect. Yeah. We saw some growth. Yeah. In this passage.
Yeah, I even think one of the things that we have to break down is when we look around and we take inventory of what we have, it's not always just financial or tangible item. Yeah. It can even just be time. Yes. It can be a level of flexibility and schedule. It can be, honestly, it can even be an intelligence or strength even of people who say, ooh, I'm really good at doing car stuff. I'm a car mechanic geek. Yeah. Let me go and care for a family who's maybe a single mother who can't necessarily afford an oil change. And let me just do that and bless them that way. We can get creative with what we have. It goes a lot more than just your bank account and the physical items you have around you.
Well, and communicating that with others so that it can actually come into existence. Yes. And so I think today, as we work through this passage, a couple things that stand out that I think you can directly apply to your life. Yeah. One, take inventory. What do you have? What is available to you? Maybe it's resources. Maybe it's time. Maybe it's a skill set or giftedness. Yeah. Two, who are you communicating that to? Are you speaking up and letting us know at Generations Church? Are you letting others in your circle of influence know that you have this skill and ability to care for others? And lastly, or maybe not lastly, but are you motivated to that? Do you have the compassion to do that for others? And then what I would say probably last is are we returning to the presence of Jesus with these things again and again and again? And if we do that, the result, people will be satisfied, and there will be plenty left over, even for you.
Thanks for joining us on this version of the GenChurch Midweek Podcast. We're so glad you joined us this week. I hope you're able to take something and journey along through this passage with us and through the Everyday Faith Study Guide. If you are someone who maybe, as we were talking through this, you're beginning to notice something, a skill or time or financial ability that you have, and you're looking for a place or a way in which to share that and to be able to use that for others, send us a message today. Go ahead and directly send us a message. We would love to connect with you and help you begin to translate that into your everyday life. Maybe you're able to use that through the church, or there's some people or resources in our community that could really be blessed by that. So let's go be everyday people wherever we live, work, and play. Have a fantastic week.
Deuces.